only does she elicit his keser, right? Because we said he only gets crowned, Shlomo HaMelech gets crowned by his mother, B'yom Chasunaso, on the day of his wedding, which means when the Makabel shows up, that's when all of a sudden he gets the koach to give hashpah on such a deeper level. Shmuel, I think it was you asked the question yesterday. No, Noam. But like, what is it about her basically that requires him to go into such a deep, essential place? And really, it's actually her lowliness compared to him, right? Because the fact that, remember we said, like, when your idea has to actually breach into words and actual speech, it's a big tircha to lower yourself into the medium of speech. So the whole idea is that going down into the other, right? As long as it's all taking place inside of your own head, inside of the man, you can go low and come up with thoughts and ideas, which is like taking the Seder Ishtalshlus of yourself. But as soon as that has to break off and go into the other, right? So that requires an intense level of descent, which is also like a great tircha on the person, right? To communicate yourself. You can think to yourself all day long. So as soon as there's a student or someone that needs to understand that's not you, it requires a much deeper level of power to get it to go down so low, right? So this is the idea why she elicits. When he all of a sudden has to, mate essentially, and he elicits this, it's because he has to take his essence and not just for himself anymore, he has to like transplant it to another. Right? So she first and foremost, she elicits his essence, right? So that's what it means that she gives his crown. Now we did come up with a second explanation of what it means that the mother crowns him. Let's just go over that for 1 second because there's a lot of little details going on here. We said that Bina Yasera Nitna Leisha, there's this extra Bina that the woman has, and that this mother crowns him. So when the Makabel stimulates the Za, so it says, why is it called the mother that is crowning him? What does the mother have to do with it, we said? Because basically, since Bina is directly above Za, she's actually the crown. And therefore, Bina is synonymous with the Keser. Which part of Bina exactly? Tiferes of Bina, right? But then we had another explanation, and I believe is Lafia Nias Daiti, in other words, my small understanding of this. We went into this whole idea about how Rosh Hashanah is called Binyan HaMalchus, right? And that ultimately, once on the 10 days of Rosh Hashanah, the actual Malchus is built, which means that the woman, the feminine, actually has to have her own individual part too. So she goes in, and that gets built not through Za, because Za is merely light, right? So she gets directly from the Mochin, we said. The Bina itself goes directly and builds the Malchus without the need for the interference of Za. You remember this from yesterday? But the important part, I believe, of that paragraph was that it's not that the Mochin are coming up with this Shefa on their own. They themselves are a conduit to the Keser, to the Orein Sof, that's going through the Mochin, over jumping Za and building Malchus. So the idea is that this is really, if you think about this, is another explanation of what it means that the day that his mother crowned him, right, is the idea that Bina itself is not even the crown. Bina is just a conduit through which the real Keser comes through, right? So it's another way of understanding why it's called Bina being the crown. One is that Bina is actually the level of the crown, Tiferes of Bina. Another is that the crown is coming through Bina, so it's appropriate to say the mother crowns, but really it's not the mother's light at all, it's the crown of the Keser itself.
But the Mitzvah of Malchus in the insight that there is no light, it's just pure Atmos?
Right, so when I say light, I just mean like the shurish of Malchus, coming down.
So what is the actual Bina holding? It's the same, from Malchus to the insight, it's the same exact thing, just Atmos.
Right, but how does it get there? Right? It's that very mechanism of transference that makes it come out.
So it's not just like a drop down and then all of a sudden Malchus is there. Like it has to actually flow through Seder Shalom.
That energy of what makes up Malchus, which is again, like you're right, not light, it's more like vessels. But if you think about it, even letters have to sort of come down through different stages, right? So there's First, it could be letters of chakika. Then it could be letters of kasiva. You're right. There's like letters of thought, letters of speech, letters of action. So you're right. It's not light coming down; just different levels of letters, which comes from the atzmos, but it's still some kind of a transference. Fine. So anyway, that was all a discussion to understand how the mother is doing the crowning, whether it's Bina itself or really the Kesser coming through Bina. But then we wound up moving on and saying that, again, Malchus has this sort of dual role. On one hand, she triggers the Kesser to come into Zah, which means she gets the man to tap into his essence and produce this seed. But furthermore, she then takes that seed and creates something with Yesh Me'ayin. Meaning to say, even after she's brought the essence out of the man, he's basically still kind of useless. Right? She's the one that has the ability, like we said, I think a good mashal of making a tree come out from a seed in the ground. The seed is not actually producing the tree, right? It's just a little guy. It doesn't have that much girth, right? It's the earth that actually becomes a tree, which means the earth. There's a tree in the earth. It's a potential tree. It doesn't know how to show itself, right? So when the seed comes in, it does this job of what we call a birur, mad on the man, right? The drop from the man, which is called the masculine waters, mine the harim, it goes and starts to like do this sifting process on the feminine waters, the mayim nukvim, and basically separates the bad from the good, puts the head where the head has to go, the heart where the heart has to go. It starts to like get itself into this power, let's say, of the earth, and enable this entity to come out. So all the seed does is doesn't produce the thing, because the energy, the girth of the child, it comes entirely from the material of the mother. It just basically helps organize the material. So even then, the yesh me'ayin quality comes from the mother. So in conclusion of this very wordy introduction, the female does two things so far, Malchus, right? She summons the essence to come into Zah, and from the man himself. And even with that essence, she then produces something yesh me'ayin with him. And we said basically, why does she need him? In other words, if she could produce yesh me'ayin to begin with, and the whole concept of essence is just within her. And the answer was, and this is how we left off the class, because essence is not in a state of showing itself. That's what essence is. Essence is essentially hidden. It's like essentially tznius, right? So unless there's some catalyst to bring it to come out, it will just stay hidden. The earth will just remain the earth, right? So she does an interesting thing. She draws forth the catalyst. That's also her power, in order so that the latent secret, which would just remain without a pool of affecting itself to come out, also gets pulled out. And that's where we kind of left off. Memela eino begeder pu'ula lif'ol. Because she's essential. She's not in the category of making anything and doing anything. It just like sits in an essential hiding place. What's that? For this reason, right? Okay, so let's look inside, everyone together. The line starts Kamo Cain. You see that? Page 17, right in the middle of the first paragraph. The Kamo Cain, it's a Rosh Tevos. You see that? Kamo Cain Koach. The Kamo Cain Koach HaEtzam, the power of the essence. Shaba Makabel, that the receiver, as we've been saying, has, whether it's the letters, whether it's the woman, Einu Begeder Pu'ula Be'atzmo. It doesn't do anything on its own. Like the earth just sits there, even though it has the power of the essence, the whole concept of essence, that it doesn't come out of itself. And so therefore, it requires this catalyst. Avalam Shachas Hamad, Hu Ke'ein Bechinas Gilei Etzam. So therefore, it's interesting what she does to the man, which she draws forth his essence. This is basically another way of saying she reveals the essence, right? Even though she's essence and essence is not revealed, but the koach she has on this man is that she is kind of bringing forth a state of revelation from the essence, because the man is light, the man is Zah. And not only is the man Zah, but when he has reason for interaction with the woman, Zah gets increased, and he all of a sudden has this intense keser. That's called like a gilui of the Atzmus. Now, even though she's Atzmus, she's not in a position to reveal herself, but she sort of summons the revelation of the Atzmus to come out of him, or his Atzmus, his essence to come out. So that's like a form of revealing the essence. And that's why, at least in in a revealed sense, it looks like the man has the power to give birth. Like, in other words, he's doing something about it, right? She's just sort of sitting there because his idea is that he's revealing the concept of essence. So there's a revelation of birth giving more associated with him in a sense, because light is relevant to revelation. It's just that he can't actually create the child, right? He can't actually give birth and make anything. Because at the end of the day, he's only revelation. He's not actually essence. I have to explain these words. There's very deep stuff going on here. It's cool stuff. In other words, why is he saying that you could see the power of birth in the man more than the woman? Is that it's somewhat obvious to me, but everything we've just said, maybe it doesn't seem obvious, right? Because again, he's bringing forth the seed, right? So it's like he's providing seemingly the birth-giving material, right? So in other words, that's sort of called a revelation of the essence. If it's a revelation of the essence, then maybe we'll go so far as to say that he can actually full-on reveal the essence and have a child. No, he can't take it that far. She reveals the concept of essence to come out, but since he is light, and there's no light can't make essence, right? So therefore, it's only when he interacts with her that the essence can actually truly create something from nothing. Welcome, Moshe. Again, I'm going to repeat that. On one hand, her bringing his seed is something like what we would say revelation of the essence, right? Because his essence comes out. So her Inyan is essence, and yet we see that she's actually capable of revealing the essence from him. And that's what we see, that when it comes to birth giving, he sort of is the shiny one, right? On the other hand, even after he reveals his essence, he's essentially limited as can be, because he can't do anything. It's not really a revelation of the essence. Why? Because at the end of the day, he's like a light man, right? Light is great if it associates with essence and attaches itself to essence so it can shine the essence, but it can't actually produce anything yesh me'ayin. It can't actually give birth because it's on the side of light, right?
Even the essence of man is just light.
Even the essence of man is just like, she brings out his essence, right? Because the whole idea of her being the essence is that she has the ability to reveal essence. But even when she reveals it from him, it's only like a precursor so that his revelation of his essence will then actually truly reveal her essence, right? Because it brings her powers of creation into being. Very subtle, but powerful. Does everyone sort of follow what we just said there? Yes or no? Okay, I like that. Yes. Bring it on. All right, so, and anyway, because he is only revelation, his whole shtick, and not etzem mamash, therefore he can't actually give birth. However, what he can do, once he reveals, so to speak, his essence, which is now sort of the essence of light, he can now stimulate the power of birth and actual creation in the makabel, in the receiver, to actually make something from nothing. However, at the end of the day, the true bringing into existence something from nothing comes from her alone, mikoach atzma, from her own self, not from him. He just, like a seed in the ground, he just stimulates the apple tree to come out instead of the orange tree, but the ground is producing all of this. It's just a stimulator. But because there's now like an essential light knows how to reveal the essence. So suddenly, the apple tree comes out. The child is born. What's that?
You said Shimon and not Levi?
Right. Hainu mitzad yisrod ma'ilasa b'shorsha. And why does she have all this koach that he doesn't have? Because of her advantage in her source. Kamoshnis bar le'el, as we've been saying. The shorsha malchus u'lamayla mizan. Her root is higher than his root. The shorsha mi'atzmus atika kadisha. Her source comes from the essence of atik. L'chein yesh ba bina yasera, and that's why she has this thing we call bina yasera, right? The levad zos masha shefa nimshach mina mashpia hu aidei makabel dafka. So what is this bina yasera? What is this advantage that she has? So again, twofold. Besides the fact that besides the fact that the shefa that's drawn from the mashpia comes from her, right? As we've been saying, she summons his essence. That's like a bina yasera that we've been saying the whole time. Just like speech, we said before, brings the meaning to be deeper, because when you go into the other, it has to empower itself, right? So that's called the bina yaser that's found in the Isha, because she basically creates more essence revelation to come out of him. So despite the, in other words, that's one explanation of bina yasera, that she has this quality of bringing forth the shefa from the mashpia. And so now she also has this second thing. Besides stimulating his essence, she is the one that has the power to create yesh me'ayin entirely on her own. That she could actually make a clone of him, and this is definitely called bina yasera, like an extra koach that he does not have. All right, so let's see. We've been giving the mashalim. He says that an example of this above, as we explained earlier. These havus bechinas malchus, that bringing creation into existence, yesh me'ayin, comes from malchus of Atzilus, right? As we were saying before, as we stumbled into this paragraph, or lightly tread into this paragraph, that the main inyan of yesh me'ayin is from malchus of Atzilus, more so even than the chokhmah. Right, that because the chokhmah we said is like a yesh netzal. It's merely a emanated world, but the real yesh mi'ayin, the real creation, is in bria, and therefore the one who's responsible for creating something yesh mi'ayin is mamish malchus. So too, just like it is down below with a man and woman, the sphere of malchus creates. How does she create? Because she has this power of the essence. As we said before, only God's essence can create something from nothing. Remember the famous words, because mitziyuso ma'atzmuso, because his existence is from himself. So therefore he and he alone can make something else be. Why can't any other realm make something else be yesh me'ayin? Because its own energy, it's busy receiving. In other words, its own existence is based on a previous cause. So therefore, since it's not even responsible for making itself, it certainly can't make anything else. But if you can make something else from nothing, then it shows you have the power of the atzmus. However, it's explained in the Sefer Shel Beinanim, in the letter that begins, he and his kelim are one. Livro behem va'al yadam ayin liyesh. Right, so he says over here in the Tanya that first of all, there's something called ihu v'chiyui v'ihu v'garmui chad. You heard this before. It's a famous statement. It's also the name of a chapter in the Tanya. It means he and his lights, he and his vessels are one. So it's really referring to the lights and the vessels of Atzilus. And it's saying he is one with his lights and he is one with his vessels. The idea of Hashem being one with his light is usually considered to be more understandable than Hashem being one with his vessels. Because vessels are like a plurality, vessels like a thing. How can you say, if you say Hashem is one with his light, it doesn't really infringe on his singularity. When you say Hashem is one with his vessels, right? Like to say God is one with your soul, it's more like tangible, more sustainable to understand than to say God is one with your body. Because then you're all of a sudden putting God into the category of a body. And that sort of like seemingly could infringe on this concept of singularity, right? Nonetheless, there's a big chiddush there. God is one with his lights and God is one with his vessels. And this is a very deep chapter of Tanya. And the idea is that when he says he's one with his vessels, livro behem ba'al yadam me'ayin liyesh, that he creates with these vessels, talking about pretty much malchus of Atzilus, which is essentially the vessel, the poster child of vessels in Atzilus, that through him being one with his vessels, he creates with them mi'ayin liyesh, from nothing to something. The ihu hu b'chinas ha'or, right? And in this capacity, he's saying that ihu, the word ihu, he represents the light. When it says ihu v'garmu ichad, that he and his vessels are one, it's saying the light, ihu is light, amnam lo shis havu shum b'chinas ha'or. However, even though he and his vessels are one to create something from nothing, so you might say that the creation of something nothing comes from the ihu part, which is his light. But that's not what it says. It says ihu v'garmu ichad. He and his vessels are one in order to create something yesh ma'ayin. The creation yesh ma'ayin doesn't come from the ihu, he part, which is his light, ki'im b'chinas ostrios v'kelim demalchus, but rather from the garmui part, which is his vessels, from the letters and the vessels of malchus. Again, because it's a very wordy and complicated situation. It's also, if you don't know what he's referencing, it makes it one step removed. But once again, I'm just going to say the whole thing. There's a statement in the Zohar, brought down in the Tanya, which is Ihu v'garmu ichad, livro behem v'al yadam yesh me'ayin, which means he and his vessels are one, through them he creates yesh me'ayin. Now you might think that, how is he doing this? His light is creating yesh me'ayin, right? And the Alter Rebbe is coming to explain that's not what it means. He uniting with his vessels, Iyu v'garmui, is the one who creates yesh me'ayin, for all the reasons that we've been saying. Garmuhi is his vessels, his malchus of atzilus. And it's them specifically, when Hashem unites with them, that allows the creation to come out something from nothing. For the reasons we've been saying, malchus has the essence in her, and she has the power to create yesh me'ayin. So then just give me garmuhi. Why doesn't it just say garmuhi creates yesh me'ayin? Why do you have to say ihu v'garmuhi chad livro behem yesh me'ayin? Why do you add in the light? What's the light's business? If it's not, the light doesn't have the power of the atzmus, why does it have to say that together the light with the vessel creates yesh me'ayin? For the reason that we just said in the last paragraph. Because lios koach ha'atzmish malchus, since that essential power that malchus has is bechinas helam, it's in a state of concealment, because something essential, the definition of it is it doesn't show itself. It's the opposite of light, of shining. Which means, as we said before, einu begerer pu'ula, she's not in the category of doing anything, just like the earth without a seed. It doesn't just show off its essential qualities. L'chein tzrich lios al yedei ihu. And that's why it says, ihu v'garmui chad livro behem yesh ma'ayin. You need the combo of the light and the vessel to create yesh me'ayin. The vessel is the one who actually has the power to create yesh me'ayin. The light is the one who nudges her to show that power. And therefore, ihu v'garmu ichad. Hu b'chinas ha'or. And the ihu is the light. Shu b'chinas ha'mamutza, which is the intermediary, la'orer b'chinas kochis habu shu b'malchus, to stimulate the power of creation in malchus. She won't do it on her own. She yavo b'gila, it should come to show itself. V'kamo ken hu b'leidas ha'neshamas. And so it is when it comes to the birth of souls. Right? That God, it's very cool. All right, you want to have a question first?
No, this is way out there. Finish the first.
No, I mean, I'll wait on this next line.
So you said that Hashem originally, when he created the world, he had a time to create it. But if Hashem in essence is nothing but essence, what pulled that out?
Light. He's light in essence. That's the point. Like Hashem is, when it says before Hashem created the world, Hu Ushmo Bilbad.
Right.
Him and his name alone. That's what we're presented with, like God by himself. Him is his essence. His name is his light. So basically, he's like almost like it says Zachar Nekeva Bara Osam. Hashem created him, man and woman, as one. Right? He did separate at one point the man and the woman, but they started off as one, in the sense that these two qualities were inside of God, and he could reveal the essence on his own. Right? Once he set that up, he changed sort of the operation so that they would separate, and they would have this unique way of uniting in order to, because they can't really have a baby, I guess, when they're back to back like that. So in order for him to reveal these powers, the light and the vessel had to sort of separate and then reunite so that they could interact with each other. And that's the idea. But first you have to do is separate the woman. So that's the idea of putting the man to sleep and creating like the malchus as an independent thing. And once you have that, then the light and the vessel can come together and create yesh me'ayin. So he went. That's what the tzimtzum is, right? He separated, and then he reunited the tzimtzum, which is like pure darkness, and a little light then entered to it. It's called the kav. So basically, the whole idea of men and women is like the tzimtzum and the kav, which then with those two things together, ihu v'garmuhi, he creates yesh me'ayin. It's really the tzimtzum. Yeah, the power of like making something is really from the tzimtzum. But it's dark. It won't do anything unless somebody stimulates it. Yeah, exactly. And again, the kav is exactly the same thing. The kav is really the essence of the Orient Sof. Even though the kav is just a little ray, so you could compare it to a seed of a man. What is it? It's like bupkis. Like I'm a whole man. You're excited about my seed, but the idea is that how does the kav is the only one that has the power to break through into the world of the darkness, because the Orient Sof, when the tzimtzum comes, it's out. It cannot interplay with the dark, right? The whole idea of the tzimtzum is it makes the Orient Sof not shine. So what's the chiddush of the kav? The kav is higher than the Orient Sof, even though it's a putrid drop of Orient Sof, because it is the only part of the Orient Sof that breaks through and can be seen in the other. So it's exactly like the seed, right? And therefore creation starts to come into being. We're getting it. Right? So he says here that, just finishing this idea, is that this is also the idea of the birth of souls. This whole idea that God can make a soul. What is a soul? Chelek elokami mal mamish. This should really kind of freak you out about what you are and who you're sitting next to. That a yid is a mamish piece of God. God has a baby, right? And he makes a clone of himself. And it's called the birth of souls. It's a piece of Elokus. It's God. The Iker is Havus Umbechinas Malchus. Where do these souls come from? Again, the main existence of the soul, that it should be as opposed to not be, comes from Malchus. She's the power of creation, Yesh Me'ayin. And that's why Malchus is called Knesset Yisrael, Makar Neshamas Yisrael. We've gone just right now back to the beginning of the Maimer. Because remember we talked about Kos. Malchus is called Kos. It's this cup. And it's also called the Knesset Yisrael. Which, right, why do we say it's Knesset Yisrael? Because Yisrael is above her. Knesset means like to collect. And Malchus is like this collection of Yisrael, which is the lights of the 9 spheres above her. She collects them, right? Just like Malchus, like the womb. And therefore Malchus is also called the source of the neshamas of Yisrael, because the womb gives birth to these souls. Now you have this idea of Or Zaru Latzadik. Remember we have this in Tehillim. Right? It says the light is planted for the tzaddik. What is that light planted? That's like this kav that breaks through. That's Zaz, like influence from interacting with Malchus, that it taps into his keser and he gets crowned. That light, which is planted for the tzaddik, right, is what stimulates Malchus to create souls. Who's following along here? Yeah, we got a few takers. Let me see how we're doing on time. Plenty of it. Too much almost. I'm scared for us. But dugma mikol zeh yuvan b'masha kasuv b'yom chasunasu zumat Torah. All right, now you can't make this up, right? Really, it's talking about Shavuos, which is just a few days away. And it says an example of all this, right, is what we call the day of his wedding, which is Matan Torah. In other words, the official pasuk is the crown that his mother crowned him with on the day of his wedding. The day of his wedding, right away, the Mishnah tells us, is Matan Torah, when Hashem married the world, basically married the Jewish people. That Torah, he bechinas tipas abba nimsheches bechinas chochmah ilah. This is really deep stuff. This should stimulate a whole other level of Shavuos for us, right? What is the Torah? The Torah is the drop of the Father that's drawn from Chochmah Ilah. In other words, the Torah is called Torah Or, right? The Torah is on the side of light. And only what? The Torah is not just any old light. It's like the essential light of Hashem's essence that he somehow elicits from himself And like I said, like brings out the seed that can clone himself. It's like the instructions. It's mamash a piece of your DNA. It's God's DNA. The Torah is the seed of man. It's not just regular chokhmah, it's not just regular wisdom. Like, for example, when a person talks, which is a spiritual shefa, you bring out regular wisdom, right? Which is, it comes out in words. When you bring out the panemius, the essence of your wisdom, you don't just bring out words, you bring out a brain, right? You have the power to clone yourself. You bring out a seed, right? And that's why, by the way, Torah comes down to the physical world, whereas all the higher angels, they don't have the Torah because they're like Hashem's speech. They're also filled with the wisdom of Hashem, but they're only getting a ray of the brain. When he basically has his seed come out, it's called the Torah, and then they don't get a ray of the brain, we get like the brain. But it's not really the brain yet, it's just the ability to produce a brain. It's the man's cloning of his seed so that that can now trigger from, we're going to see from the Bnei Yisrael, to create something, to create God, right? To reproduce God. Yeah. Yes, but now we're talking about the two different levels of Chachmat Tzilus, the Chetzonius, which basically just talks, and the Panemius, which creates a seed, right? This.
So when we're doing the mitzvah, we're not actually drawing down God, we're creating a godly reality.
Yeah, Vasisem Osam, you make them. It says Vasisem Osam, and there's no vav, so it says Vasisem Atem. That's how you read it. You make them, right? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like once you read this, you're going to look at yourself and your guy sitting next to you a little bit differently. Like it's crazy what the Jew is. That's why the world doesn't know what's going on here. Neither do we. And it's like the whole place is falling apart. We got to get some mitzvahs going around here. Anyway, so the Torah is this essence of the panemius of Chochmei now coming out of Hashem. B'kiyadua hefresh bein hayichud elyon shahaya letzorach brias ha'olam liyichud dematan Torah. Now we can understand. I kind of just said it a little bit in terms of when Hashem, so to speak, talks. What does that look like? That's called creation, right? As opposed to Torah. So let's see what he says. The difference between what's called the Yichud Elyon, the higher unity that was necessary for the creating the world, right? Versus the Yichud Elyon that's necessary for Matan Torah. In other words, there's some kind of a unity of man and woman energies that are responsible both for creating the world and for producing the Torah. But there's a big difference between those unifications. The Yichud L'Tzorach Brias Ha'olam Hu B'chinas Chitzonius. It's exactly what we were just describing, right? Like when Chochmah and Bina unite, but it's only the Chitzonius of Chochmah and Bina, what comes out? A ray, like a teacher, right? He doesn't give you his brain, he gives you ideas from the brain. That's like creation, right? Hainu B'chinas Ha'ara Levad. When it's just a ray, there is a Yichud, but it doesn't bring out the essence of the person. What does it bring out? A ray of the person. And in this case, it's called, that little ray of Hashem creates the whole heavens and earth. It's a nice ray. Masha ein kain b'matan Torah. Not so the yichud that is required for Matan Torah. You leaving? You're just getting warmed up here, buddy. No, I'm just kidding. Go, do your thing. Masha ein kain b'matan Torah. Haya yichud b'chinas panemius. When it comes time for Hashem to give the Torah, he's not talking anymore, right? He's basically making love. He decides that there's now a makabel that's going to stimulate the crown of Hashem, and he's going to stimulate his essence to come out, not just mere words, which creates the world, but the letters which are going to create the Torah, which is the Hashem and his wisdom are one. Which is basically the very essence of God is in the Torah. The canal, gashmius, like we said before, the analogy of hashpa gashmi is producing a seed. The tipa sa'av nimshach b'chinas panimius sa'av, as we've been saying, that the drop that comes from the Father is from the essence of the Father. Muhus nafsho, the very essence of His soul. So Torah, what is it? It's mamish, the essence of God Himself, right? Kamo ken yuvan, so it's understood. Dam shachas haTorah hi b'chinas atzmus orein sof, right? But again, God. When we say God Himself, what do we mean? We're really talking about God as light, aren't we? Because we're talking about the masculine aspect of God. So basically, we're talking about it's the essence of the Or Ein Sof, which again would be like that Kav that we spoke about a moment ago. Like the regular Or Ein Sof is sort of nice, but when Hashem taps into his essence, the Or Ein Sof can even produce this Kav, which is the ability to break through into the other. So even though it's a much smaller, it's a tiny putrid drop compared to the Or Ein Sof, it actually contains his essence because it can interact with the other, and it takes this incredible level of like tzimtzum and tircha on his being just in order to produce this drop, right? And therefore, it has more inside of it than the rest of the Or Ein Sof. So that's what we're saying, that the Torah is from the essence of the Or Ein Sof. The afal pish and islash begashmius. Now we'll say. So one might question. We won't question because we know better now. But so then, why is it physical? When the creation of the world is all this mystical angels and stuff, why is the essence of Hashem come out as a physical Torah? No, right? Because kol inyani Torah, hem inyanim gashmim. Everything in Torah is physical, right? You can't do anything in Torah without a physical world. That's what the angels said, give it to us. Hashem said, Mitzrayim you out of time? Did you go down to Egypt? Do you have a father and a mother? Do you have a Yetzer Hara? This is not for you. Ubifrat Torah Shebal Peh, particularly the oral Torah, Sheyard Mislash Behilchos Halachas Gashmim, right? Kamoshnayim Ochzim Batalis, Umachlik Par B'Chamor, and that's even more so when it comes to the oral Torah, which gets into the minute details of the physical reality. Two people holding a talis. This one says it's mine. This one says it's mine. Your mamish in a gashmius reality 100%, or a machlik para b'chamor. This one says, I want to do a transaction with you. I'll trade you my ox for your cow. This is like the oral Torah going into all the minutiae of the physical world. None of this makes sense anywhere else. So you might say, this is the essence of God's Or Ein Sof, and it comes down to cows and donkeys. He says, don't be confused. What about you can clone yourself? Your words or your putrid drop? Right? There's something about the essence which specifically shows up as the lowest, most gashmiest part of us. And again, I explained why, because the whole idea is that to get you to come into the other, to go so low, is what triggers such a high level. And therefore, this is basically, it specifically goes into a low place. The other is what requires it to be so essential, that it has to go down so far, is what triggers that the essence is found in there. So he says, don't be confused, the Torah is Gashmias. It's like the drop from the Father, which is Gashmias. And even though it's physical, it has all the essential powers of the Father. Kamo Kain HaTorah. That's what the Torah is. It's atzmus dafka. It's the essence of God. But again, the essence of the Or Ein Sof. The kol or atzmi, any essential light, iev charlis galus kiim bedavar gashmi dafka. And anything which is bringing out the essence, it can only reveal itself in physicality, for the reasons that we've been saying, just like your seed, etc. You have a question?
Unless we're in the middle of an idea.
I think we're good for a second here.
Just because we have Shavuos coming up, and this is such a huge idea, just to summarize it, in what sense are we able to say that the giving of the Torah is higher than the creation of the world? Because that's like it's radical to say.
Well, I mean, in the sense that what does it take to create the world? The world is basically like the words of God. In fact, don't we say Baruch Sha'amar B'Haya Olam, right? That Hashem spoke and created the world. So, right? It says Beruach Piv Kol Tzva'am, with the breath of His mouth, all the legions. So creation is likened to God talking. Literally, that's how we talk about it throughout the entire Torah. Just like in a human being, what happens when you talk? An awesome thing, right? There's still this concept of the Bina Yasera, the extra Bina in the words that stimulate the light to bring forth their essence, but it's only talk. Talk is cheap, right? Which means that even when you talk, there is a unification of the light and the vessels, but not in their essential level. When you're going to, for you yourself, when you talk, you do not have, the power of speech does not have the power to clone you, which means it doesn't bear the essence of yourself in your speech. But your seed does. So we're saying that the seed is like is essentially like the giving of the Torah, That in other words, it's only half of the giving of the Torah because there also has to be the receiver. But because there's now a receiver, these Jewish people are going to receive this Torah, it brings forth Hashem's taiva to marry this woman, and it brings forth the essence of Hashem, which makes him have this seed come out. And inside of that seed, albeit it comes into a lowly place, it contains the essence of Hashem, and specifically inside of the seed, that which creation did not have. Right? That's the idea. V'neshamas Yisrael, who's the seed? Who's the receiver? Who's the bride? You guessed it. You. Neshamas Yisrael nikra b'shem Kala. The souls of Israel are called the Kala. Now, what did we just get through saying a second ago, guys? We just talked about how Hashem made souls a minute ago. Right? Now, remember in the beginning we talked about Rosh Hashanah, there was 2 stages. First, he had to make Malchus exist, and then there could be a yichud of Za and Malchus to create, to enable Malchus to reveal its power of Yesh Me'ayin. But first thing you have to do is actually make Malchus. So what he said in the previous paragraph is how God makes souls, right? First he had to make his bride in order to unite with her. So we said, how do you make a soul, basically? This is the union of Malchus of Atzilus itself. It produces Neshamas Yisrael in a similar way of giving birth, right? But once those Neshamas Yisrael are then created, there can now be a yichud of the Torah with the Neshamas Yisrael. And that's like not only making Malchus, but now making a yichud with Malchus.
With the man, like she rises the man, she's one big. The man needs to be able to come together. There needs to be something to arise the man. So that's making the Malchus. And then once it's already risen up, then now she can take the seed and go to the second stage, make that live.
Yeah, I got to think about that. It's deep stuff. Let's one more line. One more line. We have a little bit more time. So he says, fine. Now Neshamas Yisrael, they're called the Kala. Shem Mekavlim Esat Torah. They're the ones who receive this seed of God. Lios Niklat v'Nitfas behem mamash. That actually gets internalized in us, and like a womb, right? That we basically accept these words of Torah in our minds, in our hearts, in our thought, in our speech, in our action. We allow them to unite with us. Kinyan v'Talmud b'yado. And what is this? This should scare us a little bit because you really do have to unite with these things. We just came off of one of the famous Maimorim from the Alter Rebbe where he explains that you have to have the union of Chakika, the osios of Chakika, right? Parshas Bechukosai. What is the idea of Chakika? That you have to have the Torah engraved in you, like letters are engraved in stone, not just like a mere Torah scroll, where albeit you have letters on parchment, but they can be scraped off. If the Torah is attached to you in a way that it can be scraped off, then you haven't really made yourself one with it. And so it says when a person goes to Gan Eden, right? It says, happy is the man who comes to Gan Eden, v'talmudu b'yado, and his Torah is in his hand. In other words, when you leave this world, you better know your Shmona Esrei Baal Peh. You better know your Torah Shebeksav Baal Peh. You better know your Mishnayos Baal Peh, your Tanya Baal Peh. It all has to be one with you, engraved into your very being. That's what happy is the man who comes here with his Torah in his hand, because you didn't leave the Torah as one thing and you as another thing. You became one with it, and that's how you have a baby, right? If the seed goes into the woman and just kind of hangs out and says, nice for a visit, you don't make a baby. It has to become niklat, nitfas, become one. So too, the Torah has to become one with us. V'kein al hamitzvahs nemar or zarur latzadik, and as well the mitzvahs, right? It says that the light is planted for a tzaddik. Why is this connected with mitzvahs? Because the word tzaddik is associated always times with tzedakah. And it says, or zarua, you could also read it, or zarua letzedakah, that in order to do a mitzvah, there has to be a planted light. Planted means it goes into the ground, it gets rooted, it becomes one with the ground. So just like Torah has to be like engraved into you, so to the mitzvahs, they have to be planted, and you have to be a walking mitzvah, right? I mean, when you do a mitzvah, essentially what's happening, right? But they're called planted. Zera Kadosh Baruch Hu mitzvahs, that Hashem plants the mitzvahs. In other words, they have to be united. The Ora Torah v'Ora mitzvahs nizru b'neshamas Yisrael. And the idea is that the light of Torah and the light of mitzvahs are planted in the Jewish people. Shem nikra eretz chafetz. This is what the Baal Shem Tov used to say, that why are we called a desirable land? Because we have like infinite amount of goodies to come out of us, just like the earth. It can produce anything, right? And so too, the Jewish people are like this. We are like this bride of Hashem. We actually, what he's trying to say here is the Jewish people have a higher source than the Or Ein Sof, than God, right? God's light. And that's why the light just stimulates us to produce this infinite power of Yesh Me'ayin. And therefore we're called a desirable land. Ki tiyu atem eretz chafetz, you shall be a desirable land. It's a pasuk. Chavtzi ba. And it says, my desire is in it. Shem eretz haroi lezriya, which means that it's a land which is fit to be planted in. Meaning to say what? You have to make yourself a desirable land. Not every seed you put in every piece of land grows. So in other words, the Jewish people, Baruch Hashem, are the desirable land. In other words, mitzvahs don't, and Torah doesn't grow in the other nations, for example. But even also, it's a little mussar for us. Make your land. You have to break up the soil and you know all the processes that are involved in making land rich soil. It's like beating yourself, breaking yourself. All those efforts have to be made in order so that the Torah can be niklat in you. This idea of bittul and kabbalas ol. Why you come to yeshiva? Why is the first thing you wind up like joining an army and like you have to your hours are measured? Why not just give me some wisdom? Let me learn. Because you have to be a desirable land. You have to be a bittul person in order for the Torah to actually take in you. Only through the land being desirable can you have the growth. Last line. And that is because the root of the Jewish people comes from the very essence of the Or Ein Sof. We are the children of God. And just like a son drawn from the essence of the father, so too the Neshamas Yisrael are from the Penimius and the essence of the Or Ein Sof. Shukayach.